Chapter 1. Briefing. Okafor. The file was marked Priority 1, Colonial Emergency, and it had been sitting on Sarai Okafor's desk for 11 hours before she'd been cleared to read it. That was how things worked at Aegis. The contracts came through corporate channels, filtered through legal, sanitized by the intelligence division, and delivered to field commanders in neat packages that contained exactly as much information as someone 3 pay grades above you had decided you needed. The file on her desk was thinner than she'd have liked, which meant either the situation was straightforward or someone had removed the parts that weren't. In Okafor's experience, it was never the first one. She sat in her quarters aboard the Atavist, an Aegis rapid response corvette, 140 meters of reinforced hull, twin drives and enough armament to pacify a small colony if the situation required it. The ship was currently running at full burn toward the Sigma Draconis system, 3 days out from a planet called Tenebris, and Okafor was reading the same file for the 4th time, looking for the things that were "ent" in it. The basics were clear enough. Tenebris, Horizon Industries mining colony, established 6 years ago, 412 registered personnel. Deep cave mining operation extracting rare minerals from an extensive subterranean cave system. Remote, one of the furthest established colonies in the Sigma Draconis cluster, weeks from the nearest way station, months from Earth. Communication via quantum burst relay with a standard delay of 11 days to Erebus Station. 6 weeks ago, Tenebris had gone silent. The last communication was a Priority 1 emergency transmission sent via the colony's independent surface relay. The transmitting individual was identified as Tomas Reyes, a geological survey assistant, ID number TEN-0447. The transmission had been received at Erebus Station, flagged, decrypted, and immediately classified. Okafor's briefing contained a summary of its contents. Summary, not the transmission itself. She read the summary again. Colony reports encounter with hostile biological organism of unknown origin, discovered in deep cave system during routine survey expedition. Organism described as large, fast, durable, and aggressive. Multiple casualties reported. Colony infrastructure compromised. Transmitting individual reports being in the early stages of infection by the organism and does not expect to survive. Requests immediate military response with appropriate preparation. Below the summary, a series of addenda from different sources. Horizon Industries. Assessment, colony status unknown. Significant capital investment at risk. Recommend investigation and asset recovery. Science team attached to assess biological and geological findings. Terran Accord advisory. Situation unverified. Recommend cautious approach. Military observer assigned to ensure compliance with interstellar biological hazard protocols. No offensive action authorized without Accord approval. Aegis operational directive. Assess threat. Secure colony. Extract any survivors. Defer to Horizon Science Team on matters of specimen recovery. Defer to Accord Observer on matters of jurisdictional authority. 3 sets of orders from 3 organizations that fundamentally didn't trust each other, stitched together into a single mission, briefed by people who would never set foot on Tenebris. Okafor had been doing this long enough to recognize the shape of the problem. She wasn't being sent to rescue anyone. She was being sent to manage a convergence of interests in a hostile environment, and the hostility wasn't just coming from whatever had killed 400 people. She closed the file and opened the personnel manifest. Her team was 7 Aegis operators, including herself. Standard rapid response composition, a command element, a heavy weapons specialist, a medic technician, a scout, and 3 assaulters. She'd worked with most of them before. She trusted most of them. Trust was a currency she spent carefully and audited constantly. because in the field it was the only currency that mattered. Sergeant Yusef Karim, second in command. She'd had Karim for 4 years across 6 deployments. Former Terran Accord Marines, dishonorably discharged for striking a superior officer who'd ordered his squad into an unsecured zone that killed 2 of his people. The discharge was technically justified and morally bankrupt, and Aegis had recruited him before the ink was dry. He was the best combat NCO Okafor had ever worked with. Steady, decisive, and possessed of an unshakable loyalty to the people under his command that expressed itself as a constant, low-grade fury at anyone who put them at unnecessary risk. He would die for this team. Okafor's job was to make sure he didn't have to. Corporal Nia Achebe, heavy weapons, quiet, focused. The kind of person who could sit perfectly still for 6 hours in an observation post and then deliver precisely targeted fire with the mechanical consistency of an automated turret. Okafor had seen her put down a charging tunnel bear on Kepler 442b, with a burst so controlled it had looked choreographed. Achebe didn't talk about herself, didn't socialize beyond necessity, and maintained her weapons with a devotion that bordered on religious. She was 26, and she was the most dangerous person on the ship. Corporal Luka Davic, combat medic and technical specialist. Croatian. Never stopped talking. Davic processed stress through verbalization, which meant that the worse a situation got, the more he talked, which meant that his silence was the most reliable indicator of genuine danger Okafor had ever encountered. He was also brilliant with systems, electronic, mechanical, structural. If it had wires or moving parts, Davic could bypass it, repair it, or repurpose it into something that hadn't been in the original specifications. Private Emeka Obi, assaulter. 15 years in private military work, most of it in places that didn't make the news, because the people paying for the operations preferred it that way. Obi was economy of motion incarnate. He'd stripped himself of every unnecessary action, word, and thought, leaving behind a human being who functioned with the clean efficiency of a well-maintained weapon. He wasn't warm, he wasn't cold, he was operational, and in Okafor's experience, operational people survived. Private Josefina Ruiz, scout and close-quarters specialist. Born on a frontier colony, one of the early settlements in the Tau Ceti system that had nearly failed in its first decade and had produced a generation of survivors with a particular kind of hardness. Ruiz had grown up in an environment where the margin between life and death was measured in decisions, and it showed in everything she did. She was fast, aggressive, and possessed of an instinct for spatial awareness that made her the natural choice for point position. She'd volunteered for this mission, which Okafor had noted without comment. Private Kenji Sato, assaulter, the youngest. 22, third deployment, still carrying the eagerness that experience would eventually sand down to something more sustainable. Sato was good. His training scores were excellent, his physical conditioning was elite, his attitude was committed. He had not yet been in a situation where training failed to map onto reality, and Okafor watched him the way she watched all young operators, with care, with investment, and with the quiet awareness that his first real test would determine whether he became Obi or became a name on a memorial. The non-Aegis attachments were a separate concern. Dr. Elliot Marsh, Horizon Industries, xenobiologist. Okafor had received his file directly from Horizon's personnel division, which meant it contained exactly what Horizon wanted her to know, and nothing else. 20 years of fieldwork, published extensively. Reputation for brilliance and for a certain flexibility regarding ethical boundaries that academic institutions tolerated and corporate employers actively valued. Marsh had requested this assignment. He hadn't been ordered. He'd asked. That told Okafor something about his priorities that his file didn't. Dr. Risa Tanaka, Horizon Industries, geologist and environmental specialist. Younger than Marsh, less political, assigned to the mission rather than volunteering for it. Her file was thinner, her publication record more modest, her corporate profile lower. Okafor read her as the competent support player Horizon had attached to give Marsh's requests institutional backing. Whether Tanaka would follow Marsh's lead or exercise independent judgment under pressure was an unknown. Lieutenant Commander Alexei Volkov, Terran Accord Navy, military observer, career officer with a service record that was long, clean, and conspicuously free of combat postings. Volkov was a diplomat in uniform, skilled at negotiation, protocol, and the bureaucratic choreography that kept interstellar relations functional. He was not a field operator. His presence on this mission was political, a flag planted by the Accord to ensure that whatever happened on Tenebris happened under their nominal oversight. Okafor would extend him the courtesy his rank demanded and the trust his experience warranted, which were not the same amount. She closed the personnel files and sat in the quiet of her quarters. The atavist hummed around her, the sound of a ship under thrust, the vibration of engines pushing mass through vacuum at speeds that would have been incomprehensible a century ago, and that still weren't fast enough. 3 days to Tenebris. 3 days to prepare a team of 7 soldiers, 2 scientists, and a bureaucrat for a situation that a colony of 400 hadn't survived. The summary on her desk described a hostile biological organism. Large, fast, durable, aggressive. These were words that could apply to any number of threats she'd faced on colonial worlds. Predatory fauna, territorial species, the various things that evolved in places humans decided to live without asking what was already there. She'd fought animals, she'd secured colonies, she'd extracted survivors from situations that had looked unrecoverable. But 400 people were dead. An entire colony, miners, technicians, administrators, families, security personnel, wiped out by something that the last survivor had described in terms that went beyond animal. Something that compromised infrastructure, something that adapted, something that a trained security chief with military experience hadn't been able to contain with the resources of an entire colony. Okafor didn't scare easily. Fear was a tool she'd learned to manage. Acknowledge it, use it, don't let it drive. But the gap between the summary on her desk and the reality it described was a space where fear could grow. And she'd learned that the things you couldn't see in a briefing were always the things that killed you. She stood, collected the file, and went to brief her team. The briefing room was a multi-purpose space on the atavist's main deck. Grey walls, a central display table, and chairs bolted to the floor in a configuration that suggested functionality over comfort. The team was assembled when Okafor arrived, which was standard. She expected her people in place before she was. It was a small discipline that reinforced a larger one. Karim was at the head of the table, reviewing his own copy of the file on a datapad. He looked up when Okafor entered, and she read his expression without effort. 4 years of shared operations had given them a non-verbal vocabulary more efficient than speech. His face said, "I've read it. I don't like it. I have questions you probably can't answer." She gave him a fractional nod that said, "I know. We'll work with what we have." The rest of the team was arranged around the table. Achebe sat motionless, her hands flat on the surface, already still in that particular way she had. Davidge was fidgeting with a stylus, tapping it against the table edge in an irregular rhythm that would have been annoying from anyone else, but which Okafor had learned to read as his processing speed. The faster the tapping, the harder he was thinking. Obi sat with his arms crossed, his expression neutral, radiating the calm of a man who would react to the briefing with the same measured response he gave everything: assessment, adaptation, execution. Ruiz leaned back in her chair, one boot propped against the table leg, projecting the studied casualness that frontier-born operators used as armor. Sato sat upright, attentive, a datapad and stylus ready for notes. He was the only one who took notes. It was endearing. The civilians were present but separate, not by physical distance, but by the invisible boundary between people who operated in harm's way professionally and people who were visiting. Marsh sat near the display table, his posture relaxed, his expression engaged, projecting the confidence of a man who'd been on field operations before and wanted everyone to know it. Tanaka sat beside him, quieter, her hands clasped in her lap, her eyes moving between the soldiers with the watchful caution of someone who understood she was in unfamiliar territory. Volkov occupied the chair nearest the door, his uniform immaculate, a datapad on his knee, representing the Terran Accord with the composed formality of a man who represented it everywhere. "You've read the brief," Okafor said. She didn't frame it as a question. "Here's what we know. Tenebris Colony, Horizon Industries, 412 personnel. Deep cave mining operation on a high-value mineral deposit. 6 weeks ago, the colony transmitted a Priority 1 emergency and went silent. No communication since. No response to hails from our approach vector." She activated the central display. A holographic rendering of Tenebris appeared, a sphere of dark rock and ice, orbital data scrolling along the margins. She zoomed to the colony's location on the northern crust. The colony is built into a natural cave system. 3 main levels, upper, mid, lower, extending approximately 600 meters below the surface. Single access point on the surface here. A marker appeared on the cliff face. The cave system extends significantly beyond the colony's infrastructure. Geological surveys mapped approximately 8% of the total network. The remaining 92% is unexplored. She let that number sit. 92%. An unknown space, vast and unmapped, connected to the colony they were entering. She saw Karim's jaw tighten slightly. She saw Ruiz's casual posture stiffen by a degree. Good. They were hearing what she needed them to hear. The emergency transmission was sent by a single individual, a geological survey assistant named Tomás Reyes. The transmission describes a hostile biological organism encountered in the deep cave system. The organism is described as large, taller than human, fast, durable, and capable of problem-solving. It allegedly compromised the colony's power grid and ventilation systems. Conventional sidearms were used against it and were reported as insufficient. "Allegedly," Karim said. "The transmission is from a single source under extreme duress. We treat it as credible intelligence, but not confirmed until we verify on the ground. That said..." She looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. 400 people are dead or missing. Something did that. We planned for the worst case. "What's the worst case?" Sato asked. "The worst case is that the transmission is accurate and the organism is still present in the colony. We go in expecting contact, full combat load. Nobody goes anywhere alone. We clear the colony level by level, document what we find, and assess the threat for follow-up operations. And if there are survivors?" Volkov asked from his chair by the door. His voice was measured, diplomatic, the voice of a man who asked questions for the record. "Then we extract them. That's the primary objective." "And the secondary objective?" Marsh's voice, smooth and interested and carrying the particular weight of a man who already knew the answer. Okafor looked at him. "The secondary objective is threat assessment and data recovery. Dr. Marsh, your science team is here to evaluate the biological and geological findings referenced in the transmission. You operate under my tactical authority at all times. If I say we move, we move. If I say we leave, we leave. Your research objectives are subordinate to the safety of this team. Is that clear? Perfectly, Marsh said with a smile that acknowledged the authority without fully accepting it. Dr. Tanaka, same applies. You'll have access to the colony's geological data and facilities as conditions permit. Your safety is my responsibility. I take that seriously. Tanaka nodded. No smile, no performance, just acknowledgement. Lieutenant Commander Volkov, you're here as the Accord's representative. I respect your authority in matters of jurisdiction and protocol. In matters of tactical operation, I lead. If we disagree, we discuss it. If we can't resolve it, my call stands until we're off-planet. Acceptable? Acceptable, Volkov said, with the caveat that I reserve the right to file a formal objection to any decision I believe violates Accord regulations. File whatever you want. Just do it after we're back on the ship. A slight tension in the room, the boundary between military pragmatism and institutional authority, drawn cleanly and left visible. Okafor preferred it that way. Hidden tensions fractured under pressure. Visible ones could be managed. She turned back to the display. Operational plan. We land at the surface access point and establish a base camp. Full perimeter security. The dropship stays hot, engines on, pilot in the seat, ready for immediate extraction. We enter the colony as a single unit. Upper level first, then mid, then lower. We do not split up unless tactical necessity demands it and I authorize it. We document everything. We touch nothing without clearance from Dr. Tanaka or Dr. Marsh. We maintain radio contact at all times. If you lose comms, you fall back to the last known good position. She paused. The display rotated slowly, the dark sphere of Tenebris turning in the holographic light. Questions about the organism. I know you have them. I'll tell you what the briefing tells us, which isn't enough. It's biological, not mechanical. It's native to the planet, not introduced. It operates in darkness and confined spaces. It's strong enough to damage industrial infrastructure and fast enough that trained personnel couldn't track it. Sidearms didn't stop it. Heavier weapons may be more effective, which is why Achebe is carrying enough firepower to start a small war. Achebe didn't react. She never reacted. But Okafor caught the fractional shift in her posture. A settling, a readiness, the silent acknowledgement of a weapons specialist who'd just been told she might be the most important person on the team. The briefing also references an infection vector. The organism may have a parasitic life cycle involving human hosts. Details are limited. She saw Marsh shift in his peripheral vision. Limited, a careful word. Standard biological contamination protocols apply. Full suit integrity at all times below surface. Any breach, any exposure, any contact with unknown biological material, you report it immediately. No exceptions, no delays, no heroes. What kind of parasitic life cycle? David asked. The stylus had stopped tapping. The briefing doesn't elaborate. The transmission references something growing inside infected colonists. Beyond that, I don't have details. She looked at Marsh. Doctor. Marsh spread his hands in a gesture of open-palmed candor that Okafor didn't entirely believe. The transmission describes a biological agent that integrates with host tissue. The mechanism isn't clear from the available data. It's one of the things we're going to Tenebris to understand. So we're walking into a situation with a hostile organism that can get inside people, and nobody can tell us how it works or how to stop it, Karim said. That's correct, Okafor said, which is why nobody takes their suit off. Nobody touches anything biological without gloves and clearance, and if anyone starts feeling unusual, fatigue, fever, appetite changes, skin changes, anything, you come to Davich immediately. Not later, not after the mission. Immediately. The room was quiet. The display turned. Tenebris rotated in its slow, silent orbit around a dim red star, a dark world holding its secrets in its crust, like a fist closed around something it didn't intend to share. 3 days, Okafor said. Use them. Check your gear. Review the briefing. Rest. When we hit dirt, we go in ready, and we come out together. Dismissed. The team filed out. Karim stayed as she'd known he would. He waited until the door closed, then looked at her with the expression she'd been expecting. The one that said he was about to ask the question she couldn't answer in front of the others. "How much of that briefing is missing?" he asked. "Enough to worry me." "Horizon?" "Horizon and the Accord both. The transmission was classified the moment it arrived at Erebus. What we got is a summary. Marsh has seen more than we have. I'd bet my commission on it. And we're taking him into a hot zone with corporate directives we haven't seen." "Yes." Karim was quiet for a moment. He looked at the display, at the dark sphere turning in empty space. 400 people, Sarai. I know. Not miners on a bad day, not a reactor failure or a cave-in. 400 people gone, and the last one alive described something that sounds like it came out of a nightmare. I know. Are 7 of us enough? Okafor looked at the planet, 3 days away, getting closer with every second, the distance shrinking, the dark growing. No, she said. Probably not. Karim nodded. He hadn't expected a different answer. He'd wanted to hear her say it because honesty between commanders was another form of trust, and trust was what kept people alive when the mission couldn't. He left. Okafor stood alone in the briefing room with the holographic planet rotating in front of her, casting dim light across the grey walls. She thought about the file on her desk, the summary, the gaps. 400 people, an organism that problem-solved, a colony that had gone dark in a matter of days. And somewhere in the redacted sections of a classified transmission, a dead man's voice saying things that 3 separate institutions had decided she didn't need to hear. She turned off the display. The room went dark. 3 days.